The testimony began at exactly noon, Belthara Standard Time. Every screen across the council territory showed the same image, an elderly human woman sitting in a simple chair. Her name was displayed below her face. She was 243 years old, kept alive by advanced human medicine, but her eyes carried the weight of millennia. She spoke in a voice that was soft but clear, and her words were translated into every known language simultaneously. My name is Hannah. I was 7 years old when they came to New Haven. I remember that morning because I was angry at my mother. She had told me I could not keep the small creature I found near our home. It was native to the planet with 6 legs and soft fur. I wanted a pet and she said no. Across the galaxy, billions of people watched. In homes, in public squares, in government offices. Gina watched from Station Hadan. Borum watched from the council chambers. Even Guman, who had insisted he would not watch propaganda, found himself unable to look away. I was in school when the alarm started, Hannah continued. We did not know what they meant at first. Then our teacher received a message on her communicator. Her face went white. She told us to hide under our desks. I remember thinking how strange that was. How could desks protect us from anything? Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. The building shook. We could hear explosions. Some of the children started crying. I did not cry. I was too confused. Then the ceiling collapsed. Not on us, but near us. I could see the sky through the hole. The sky was full of ships. Not our ships. Strange ships with weapons firing down at the city. Taijin watched from his office alone. He had read reports about the attacks. Dry factual accounts, but hearing it from someone who had lived through it was different. Unbearably different. My teacher got us out of the building, Hannah said. We ran through streets filled with fire and rubble. I saw people lying on the ground who were not moving. I saw my neighbor, Mr. Kim, trying to dig through the ruins of his house with his bare hands, calling for his wife. We did not stop. My teacher said we had to get to the evacuation point. She paused, taking a slow breath. The evacuation point was chaos. Thousands of people trying to board transport ships that could only hold hundreds. My mother found me. She held me so tight I could barely breathe. She kept saying, "Thank God, thank God, thank God." I never saw my father again. He was at work when the attack started. The whole industrial district was destroyed in the first minutes. In the council chambers, delegates sat in absolute silence. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked ill. A few had tears on their faces. We were among the lucky ones, Hannah continued. We got on a transport. But it was not a proper evacuation ship. It was a cargo hauler, never meant for passengers. There were no seats, no proper life support, barely any food. 14,000 people crammed into spaces meant for equipment. We traveled for 6 weeks to reach Sol system. In that time, 8,000 people died. Her voice finally cracked. They died of starvation, of disease, of simple despair. Parents gave their food to their children. The elderly volunteered to go into cold sleep chambers that everyone knew probably would not wake them. The young died because even with every sacrifice, there simply was not enough to go around. We threw bodies into space because we could not even give them proper funerals. She looked directly into the camera, and it felt like she was looking into the soul of everyone watching. I survived because my mother gave me her food. She died 3 days before we reached Earth. She was 32 years old. I have lived 243 years, and not a single day has passed when I do not think about her sacrifice. The screen changed to show another survivor, an old man named Daejin. He told his story of a different colony, a different attack, but the same horror, the same desperate flight, the same unbearable losses. Then a third survivor, a woman named Soman, who had been a medical officer during the Exodus. She described in clinical detail what happens to the human body when it slowly starves in the cold of space. The way children's organs shut down first because their smaller bodies have fewer reserves. The way people would beg for just one more day, one more breath, one more moment with their loved ones. When the testimony ended after 3 hours, the galaxy sat in stunned silence. Taejin received Commander Hyun's analysis 20 minutes later. Sir, I am monitoring public networks across council space. The response is overwhelming. People are demanding answers. They want to know why this was kept from them. They want to know what the council is going to do. But not everyone was moved. In the military command center, Ambassador Guman was rallying support for armed resistance. This is emotional manipulation, he argued to a group of like-minded delegates. They show us sad stories to make us feel guilty. But guilt is not a reason to surrender entire star systems. We must stand firm. He had convinced enough of them. By a narrow vote, the Council authorized the mobilization of their combined fleet. 8,000 ships from 17 different species would gather between Velthara Prime and the human Armada. It would be the largest military force the Council had ever assembled. When Taejin learned of the vote, he felt something break inside him. He had tried. He had shown them the truth. But fear and pride had won over compassion and reason. He sent a private message to Admiral Dong-hyun. We have failed to reach consensus. Some of our members are preparing for armed conflict. I am sorry. I tried. Admiral Dong-hyun received the message and felt no surprise, only a deep, tired sadness. He had hoped the testimony would change things, but he had also prepared for this outcome. Commander Yoonji signaled the fleet, battle formation. Sir, perhaps we should give them more time. They have made their choice, Dong-hyun said quietly. Now we respond. The two fleets faced each other in the void between Velthara Prime and its largest moon. 8,000 council ships arranged in standard defensive formations, their weapons charged and shields at maximum. 10,000 human dreadnoughts holding position in perfect geometric arrays that looked more like art than military formation. On the bright Discovery, Captain Minji watched with growing horror. They are actually going to fight. This is insane. Hyun was frantically trying to contact Taejin, Boram, anyone who might stop this. But communication channels were being jammed by military protocols. No one was listening anymore. Lieutenant Seung-ho stood on Station Hadan with Gina and Kwan, all of them watching the tactical displays. This is going to be a massacre, he said softly, and not the one they expect. Ambassador Guman transmitted the final warning from his flagship. This is the Galactic Council Defense Force. You have entered sovereign space without authorization. Withdraw your fleet immediately or face military action. Admiral Dong-hyun's response was brief. I gave you 72 hours. You chose violence. So be it, Guman gave the order to attack. 8,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. Missiles, energy beams, kinetic projectiles, and exotic weapons filled the space between the fleets. It was the largest coordinated assault in recorded history. It lasted exactly 17 minutes. The human point defense systems activated. Automated targeting computers that had been refined over 3 centuries of development tracked every single incoming weapon. Lasers, interceptor missiles, and kinetic barriers destroyed the Council's attack before any shot reached a human ship. Not one. Not a single impact on a single shield. Then the humans fired back, but they did not fire to kill. Every shot was calculated to disable, not destroy. Precision strikes that knocked out engine systems, weapon arrays, and shield generators. Council ships found themselves drifting in space, powerless but intact. Crews alive but helpless. In 17 minutes, the entire Council fleet was neutralized. Not a single ship destroyed. Not a single casualty. Just absolute, overwhelming, undeniable defeat. Ambassador Guman stared at his dead console in disbelief. His ship's engines were gone. Weapons offline. They were floating debris, kept alive only by emergency life support. Around him, 8,000 ships shared the same fate. Admiral Dong-hyun's face appeared on every screen in the disabled fleet. His voice was cold. We could have destroyed you in 30 seconds. We chose mercy, once. There will not be a second chance. Stand down, or the next time we fire, we will not be so careful. On Velthara Prime, Boram watched the battle's aftermath from the council chambers. The hall was in chaos. Some delegates were calling for Guman's arrest. Others were demanding immediate surrender. A few had simply fled. Taejin sat at his podium looking older than his years. He had watched the entire battle. He had seen the casual efficiency with which humanity had dismantled their fleet. He had seen the mercy in that efficiency, and somehow that made it worse. He activated the broadcast system, his voice reaching every council world. This is High Arbiter Taejin. I am hereby dissolving the current council and calling for the immediate cessation of all military action against the Terran Union. We were wrong. Our predecessors were wrong, and we have paid the price for that wrong in humiliation and defeat. It is time to face the truth and seek atonement. His next words came hard. I am stepping down as High Arbiter, effective immediately. Someone untainted by this failure must lead us forward. To Admiral Dongyun and the people of Earth, I offer my sincere apology. The first meeting of what would later be called the Crisis Council happened in a small conference room, far from the chaos of the main chambers. Taejin had gathered only those delegates he believed might actually listen to reason. Borum was there, of course. Captain Minji and Commander Hyun attended via secure video link. And surprisingly, even Ambassador Guman had agreed to come, though he sat with his arms crossed and his scales dark with anger. "We have 48 hours remaining," Taejin began without preamble. "The humans have demanded we evacuate 17 star systems and provide reparations. We need to decide how to respond." "We respond with force," Guman growled. "We unite our fleets and show them they cannot simply take whatever they want." "With what ships?" Borum asked calmly. "They have 10,000 dreadnoughts. Our combined fleet has 8,000 vessels, most of which are smaller escort ships and patrol craft. We would be obliterated. Then we surrender?" Guman slammed his fist on the table. "We give up entire worlds because they make threats?" Hyun spoke up from the video screen. "Ambassador, I have analyzed the data Commander Yunji provided. The humans are not lying. There were coordinated attacks on their colonies 3,000 years ago, and there is evidence that the Council at that time knew about it." "That was 3,000 years ago," Guman repeated. "None of us were alive then. Why should we pay for crimes committed by the long dead?" "Because we inherited the systems they left behind," Taejin said quietly. "Because we benefited from the vacuum created when humanity disappeared. Because whether we like it or not, we represent the same institutions that allowed genocide to happen." The room fell silent. Everyone understood the terrible position they were in. The humans had moral authority and overwhelming military power. The Council had neither. Borum leaned forward. "What if we offered full transparency? Open our historical archives completely. Acknowledge what happened. Return the worlds that were originally human colonies. Establish reparation payments over time. And admit we were wrong." Guman's voice dripped with contempt. "That will make us look weak to every other species in the galaxy." "We are weak," Minji said bluntly from her screen. "Right now we are at their mercy. The only question is whether we accept that gracefully or get destroyed fighting reality." On Station Hadan, Gina had been working with Lieutenant Sung-ho for 6 hours straight, helping him search through historical databases. The human officer was thorough, marking every reference to the old colony that had once existed on this site. "Here," Gina said, pulling up a file. "This is from 3,000 years ago. It mentions a human settlement called New Haven, population of about 15,000. Sung-ho's jaw tightened as he read. "Destroyed in coordinated attacks. Survivors evacuated by emergency protocols." He looked at Gina. "Do you know what happened to those survivors?" "No. The records say they fled in transport ships. But there is no record of where they went. They went to Seoul, the last safe place." Sung-ho pulled up a file on his own device, showing Gina an image of a memorial on Earth. Thousands of names were carved into black stone. These are the names of people who died in the Exodus. 14,000 made it to the transport ships. Only 6,000 survived the journey. There were not enough supplies, not enough medicine. Children died in their parents' arms. The elderly gave up their rations so the young might live. Gina felt tears burning in her eyes. "I did not know. We were never taught this history." "Of course not. The Council buried it. They did not want anyone to know what they allowed to happen." Sung-ho's voice was bitter. "Do you understand now why we came with 10,000 ships? Because we will never be the ones dying in cold transport ships again. Next time it will be others who run." Kwan, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "But you are not here for revenge, are you? If you wanted that, you would have just started shooting." Seung-ho looked at him for a long moment. "Admiral Dongyun lost his own grandfather in one of those attacks. He has every reason to want revenge, but he is also smart enough to know that genocide only breeds more genocide. He wants justice, not a galaxy of corpses." "Then help us give him justice," Gina said urgently. "Tell us what you need. Real answers, not political games." Seung-ho considered this. Then he made a decision that would change everything. "I can arrange for you to speak directly with Commander Yunji. She is the Admiral's second in command. If anyone can help find a peaceful solution, it is her." 2 hours later, Gina and Kwan found themselves on a video call with not just Yunji, but with Captain Minji and Commander Hyun as well. It was an unlikely group, A human commander, a mining station chief, a young technician, a ship captain, and a historian. But sometimes history is made by unlikely people. We need to make the council understand, Yunji explained. Not just the fact of what happened, but the weight of it. They treat this like ancient history, something that does not matter anymore. But for us, it is immediate. My grandmother's grandmother survived one of those attacks. I grew up hearing the stories. This is not the past for us. It is family. Jan nodded slowly. What if we could show them? Not just data and reports, but the human cost. The real stories, how? Quan asked. There are survivors still alive, are there not? Jan looked at Yunji. Your people have extended lifespans through medical technology. There must be people who remember the Exodus. Yunji's expression shifted. There are a few. Very old, but yes. We brought them with the fleet specifically to verify colonial sites and provide testimony if needed. Then let them speak. Borum's voice came through. She had joined the call from the council chambers. Not to the politicians. To the people. Broadcast their testimony across every world in the council. Let the citizens understand what their governments allowed. It was a risky plan. It would expose the council's historical crimes to everyone. But it might also be the only way to create enough pressure for real change. While they planned, Admiral Dong-hyun was having his own crisis of conscience. He stood alone in his quarters looking at a photo of his grandfather. The old man had died when Dong-hyun was just a boy, but the stories had shaped his entire life. The attack on New Haven, the desperate flight, the suffering. Commander Yunji entered without knocking. She was one of the few people with that privilege. Admiral, I need to brief you on a developing situation. Go ahead. She explained the plan to broadcast survivor testimony. To create public pressure for change, to potentially avoid war. Dong-hyun listened in silence. When she finished, he asked, Do you think it will work? I think it is worth trying. Sir, we can destroy them. But what then? We become the same monsters that destroyed our colonies. We become the thing we hate. And if they refuse to change, if they watch the testimony and do nothing, Yunji's voice hardened, then we use the 72 hours as planned. We take what is ours and damn the consequences. Dong-hyun nodded slowly. Set it up. Contact the survivors who are willing to speak. But Yunji, make sure they understand something. This is not just about guilt. This is about making sure it never happens again. We need the council to see that they have a choice. Reform and survive. Or stay corrupt and fall. Yes, sir. As Yunji left to make arrangements, Dong-hyun returned to the view screen showing Velthara Prime below. Somewhere down there, people were arguing about what to do. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to flee. Some wanted to negotiate. But soon they would all hear the truth from the mouths of those who had lived it. And then the galaxy would have to choose what kind of future it wanted. The broadcast was scheduled for 6 hours from now. It would be watched by trillions. The testimony of 3 survivors who had lived through the attacks, who had watched their worlds burn, who had spent 3 centuries waiting for this moment. The weight of their words would either start a war or prevent one. And nobody knew which way the galaxy would fall. The sky above Velthara Prime had always been a soft purple color, dotted with 3 moons and the gentle glow of orbital stations. But on the morning of the 73rd hour, the sky changed forever. They came in perfect formation, dropping from hyperspace with such precision that every ship appeared in the same instant. 10,000 vessels, each one massive beyond comprehension, arranged themselves in geometric patterns that covered the entire orbital space around the planet. Their hulls reflected the light of Velthara's sun, turning the sky into a sea of burning silver. From the ground, it looked like a second sun had been born. Children pointed at the sky in wonder. Adults stood frozen in fear. And in the council chambers, alarms screamed warnings that came far too late. Admiral Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of the flagship Indomitable, looking at the planet below through the massive view screen. He was a tall man with gray in his hair and eyes that had seen too much war. Behind him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, manning stations that controlled weapons powerful enough to crack a planet's crust. Status report, he ordered. All ships in position. Admiral, Commander Unji replied from her station. She was younger than Dong-hyun, but she had earned her rank through skill and dedication. The fleet is ready. No hostile movements detected from local forces. They are scared, Dong-hyun said quietly. Good. Fear will make them listen. Yunji looked uncomfortable. Admiral, we could have approached with fewer ships. This show of force might provoke them. That is exactly the point, Commander. Dongyun turned to face her. 300 years ago, our ancestors were betrayed. Our colonies were destroyed while Earth dealt with a crisis at home. Millions died. We retreated to Sol and spent 3 centuries building, preparing, and planning. Now we are back, and I will not allow anyone to mistake our intentions. We are not asking permission. We are demanding justice. He activated the communication system, broadcasting on every frequency used by the Galactic Council. His image would appear on every screen, every view screen, every display across dozens of worlds. This is Admiral Dongyun of the Terran Union, he began, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of anger. 300 years ago, humanity was forced to abandon our colonies in this region due to coordinated attacks on our settlements. We have returned to reclaim what was stolen. You have 72 hours to evacuate all worlds that were once human territory and present evidence of reparations for the lives lost. This is not a negotiation. This is a reckoning. The transmission ended. Dongyun turned back to the view screen, watching as the planet below erupted into chaos. He could see ships launching from orbital stations, heading in every direction at once. Some fled. Others tried to form defensive positions. All of them were futile gestures. On Velthara Prime, Tajin watched the transmission with a feeling of complete helplessness. Around him, the council chambers had descended into pandemonium. Delegates were screaming at each other, some demanding surrender, others calling for resistance. This is madness, Ambassador Guman roared. We cannot simply give up entire star systems. We have billions of citizens living on those worlds, and he has 10,000 ships that can destroy those worlds. Another delegate shot back. Did you see the size of those vessels? Each one is larger than our biggest battleship. Borum stood up, her calm voice somehow cutting through the chaos. We need to respond carefully. He gave us 3 days. That means he wants something other than simple destruction. We can negotiate. Negotiate? Guman laughed bitterly. He said this is not a negotiation. Were you not listening? Tajin raised his hands for silence, but no one was listening anymore. The council was falling apart before his eyes. 3,000 years of cooperation crumbling in the face of an enemy they had believed was extinct. On the edge of the Velthara system, Captain Minji and Commander Hyan watched the human fleet from their science vessel. They had retreated to a safe distance as soon as the Armada appeared, not wanting to be mistaken for a threat. I have never seen anything like this, Minji whispered. Staring at the display showing 10,000 ship signatures, our entire fleet combined would not equal 1/10 of this force. Jan was analyzing the energy readings from the human ships, and what he found terrified him. Captain, look at these power outputs. Each of those dreadnoughts is generating enough energy to maintain planetary-scale shields, while simultaneously powering weapons that could level a city in seconds. And they are not even running at full power. How is that possible? They have had 300 years to advance their technology in isolation. No wars to distract them, no political compromises, just focused development of military capability. Hyun looked at her grimly. They came here for one purpose only, to take back what they lost. And nothing in the galaxy can stop them. On Station Hadan, Gina and Quan received an unexpected visitor. A human shuttle had docked with their mining colony, and now armed soldiers in advanced armor were moving through the station's corridors. The crew had been ordered to cooperate fully. Lieutenant Seung-ho led the boarding party. He was younger than Gina had expected, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with the intimidating armor he wore. When he entered the communications center where Gina worked, he nodded politely. I am Lieutenant Seung-ho. We are searching for historical records. We have information suggesting this station was built on the site of a former human colony. We need access to your databases. Quan stepped forward. We will cooperate. But may I ask why you need armed soldiers for research? Seung-ho's expression hardened slightly. Because 300 years ago, when my ancestors asked for help, they were met with silence and treachery. We do not make the same mistake twice. Gina found herself speaking before she could stop herself. Were you there? 300 years ago? No, but my grandmother was. She was 5 years old when her colony was attacked. She watched her parents die. She spent the rest of her long life making sure we would never be victims again. Seung-ho gestured to the computers. Please, the records. Gina began pulling up the station's historical data. As she worked, she noticed that Seung-ho's soldiers were not destroying anything or threatening anyone. They were methodical, professional, almost sad in their efficiency. "You do not want this, do you?" she asked quietly. "This war?" Seung-ho was quiet for a long moment.
"I am a soldier."
"I follow orders. But no, I do not want war. I want justice. There is a difference." Meanwhile, aboard the Indomitable, Commander Yoonji had received authorization from Admiral Dongyun to establish back-channel communications with the Galactic Council. She contacted the Bright Discovery directly, knowing that Captain Minji and Commander Hyon would be watching from a safe distance. When Minji's face appeared on her screen, Yoonji spoke carefully. "Captain, I am Commander Yoonji of the Terran Union. The Admiral has authorized me to provide you with information, in hopes that someone on that council will listen to reason." "We are listening," Yan said. Moving into view beside Minji, Yoonji transmitted a data package. "These are historical records from Earth archives. 300 years ago, there were coordinated attacks on 17 human colonies in this region. The attacks came while Earth forces were responding to a crisis in the Sol system. We could not defend our people. By the time we could send help, millions were dead." She paused, her expression hardening. "We traced the attacks back to several species that are now part of your council. But more importantly, we found evidence that the council leadership at that time knew about the attacks and chose to do nothing. They were afraid of human military power. They wanted us gone. So when we were vulnerable, they allowed others to destroy us. That was 3,000 years ago," Minji protested. "The current council members were not alive then. But the institutions remain. The same council that covered up genocide then is the same council that exists now. Different faces, same corruption." Yoonji leaned forward. "We do not seek to destroy you. We seek accountability. We want the worlds that belong to us. We want acknowledgement of what was done, and we want to make sure it never happens again." Hyun absorbed this information, his mind racing. "If we could provide evidence of accountability, would your admiral negotiate?" "He might, but it would have to be real accountability, not just words. Real change." Yoonji's expression softened slightly. "I know this seems harsh, but we spent 300 years building this fleet not for conquest, but for protection. We will never be victims again." The transmission ended, leaving Minji and Hyun staring at each other in the silence of their ship. Around them, the sky still burned silver with 10,000 human ships, waiting for an answer that might prevent or start the largest war the galaxy had ever seen. The silence was worse than any alarm. When the sensor arrays went dark, they did not explode or send distress calls. They simply stopped transmitting all at once across 12 different sectors. It was as if someone had flipped a switch and turned off the eyes of the galaxy. Captain Minji commanded the science vessel Bright Discovery, one of the fastest ships in the Council fleet. She was a career officer who had spent 15 years mapping dangerous regions of space. When the emergency order came through, she did not hesitate. Within 2 hours, her ship was racing toward the edge of known space where the last sensor buoy had gone silent. "Captain, we are approaching the coordinates," her navigator announced. Still no contact with the missing buoys. Minji studied the empty star map in front of her. Normally, this region would be filled with data points showing sensor positions, relay stations, and automated monitoring systems. Now it was just blank space. "Keep scanning. I want to know what happened to them." In the crew quarters behind the bridge, Commander Hyon checked his equipment for the 3rd time. The Council had approved his presence on this mission only because he knew more about humans than anyone else alive. Taejin had personally ordered him to join Minji's expedition, though the High Arbiter's voice had carried an edge of fear that Hyun had never heard before. The message from Station Hadan had changed everything. 3 words in an ancient human language had torn through the Council's comfortable certainty. If humans were real and they were approaching, then every assumption about galactic politics needed to be reconsidered. "Commander Hyon, please report to the bridge." Minji's voice came through the ship's communication system. Hyun made his way forward, steadying himself as the ship decelerated. When he reached the bridge, he found every crew member staring at their screens in stunned silence. "What is it?" he asked. Minji pointed at the main view screen. "We found out what happened to the sensor buoys." The image showed a region of space that looked wrong. There was no better word for it. Space itself appeared twisted, like looking at a reflection in warped glass. Colors that should not exist shimmered at the edges of the distortion. Energy readings spiked across every spectrum. "This is a spatial distortion," Minji said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I have never seen anything on this scale. The affected area is larger than this entire star system." Hyun moved closer to the screen, his mind racing. "Can you analyze the energy signature?" "Already working on it," replied the science officer, a young woman with 6 arms who could operate multiple instruments at once. "Captain, these readings are impossible. The amount of energy required to create this distortion would equal the output of a medium-sized star. But this was not created by any natural stellar phenomenon." "Then what created it?" Minji asked. The science officer's multiple hands stopped moving. "Something traveling through subspace. Something so massive that it tears reality just by moving through it." Hyun felt his stomach drop. "How massive?" "Bigger than our largest capital ships. Bigger than anything in the Council fleet." She paused, checking her data again. "Captain, if my calculations are correct, this distortion was caused by thousands of vessels moving together in a single formation." The bridge went silent. Every person there understood what that meant. Someone had a fleet large enough to reshape space itself, and they were heading into Council territory. Back on Velthara Prime, emergency council sessions were rarely called. The last one had been 15 years ago during a plague outbreak. But now the crystalline chamber was packed with delegates, all shouting over each other in dozens of different languages. Taejin stood at his podium, trying to restore order. "Please, we must remain calm." "Calm!" Ambassador Guman roared, his scales rattling with agitation. "Every sensor we have in the outer rim is dead. We are blind." "How can we remain calm?" Councillor Borum raised her voice above the chaos. "We need information before we panic. We have sent reconnaissance ships. We should wait for their reports." "And if those ships do not come back?" another delegate challenged. "Should we wait until whatever destroyed our sensors arrives at our doorstep?" "No one said anything was destroyed," Borum countered. "Perhaps they simply malfunctioned." "All of them? At once?" Guman's laugh was bitter. "We are being invaded. We need to mobilize the defense fleets now." Taejin raised his hands again. "We will prepare defensive measures, but we will not start a war based on fear alone. If there is a threat, we will face it together. But we will also pursue diplomatic channels. Not every unknown is an enemy." The arguing continued for hours. Some species demanded immediate military action. Others insisted on attempting peaceful contact. A few even suggested retreating from the outer rim entirely and fortifying core systems. While they argued, Quan sat in his small office on Station Hadan, staring at streams of data. Gina worked beside him, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she ran analysis after analysis on the signal they had recorded. "I found something," she said suddenly. Quan looked up from his own work. "What?" "The signal we received. I have been trying to decode it using every method I know, but I was approaching it wrong. This is not language. It is compressed data. Military-grade encryption from at least 3,000 years ago. Can you break it?" "Already done." "Old encryption is easy for modern computers." She pulled up the results on her screen. "Quan, you need to read this." He moved to her station and began reading. With each line, his face grew paler. The message was fragmented, corrupted by age and distance, but enough remained to understand its meaning. Terrafleet. En route to Reclamation Protocol. 3 centuries overdue. All colonial territories to be. Assessment of current occupants. Reclamation Protocol. Quan repeated slowly. They are coming to take back something they believe belongs to them. But the humans disappeared 3,000 years ago, Gina protested. How can they reclaim anything after so long? Quan sat down heavily. Time works differently in deep space. If they were using experimental faster-than-light technology, or if they went somewhere time moved slower. Gina, what if for them it has only been 300 years? She stared at him. Then they think they have only been gone for a short time. They think their colonies are still here, still theirs. And they are going to be very angry when they find out what happened to them. Quan immediately sent an encrypted message to Commander Hyun. They could not use official channels. The council would take days to process the information through bureaucratic procedures. Hyun needed to know now. On the bright discovery, Hyun read Quan's message 3 times. Then he brought it to Captain Minji. This changes everything, Minji said after reading it. If they think they are just coming home and find strangers living in their territory, it could mean war, Hyun finished. Captain, we need to send this back to the council immediately. Already transmitting. Minji looked at the spatial distortion still visible on their screens. How long do we have? The science officer checked her instruments. Based on the rate the distortion is moving and the direction, I estimate they will reach the outer colonies in 72 hours. Felthara Prime in 96 hours. 4 days, Minji whispered. We have 4 days before they arrive. Hian looked at the twisted space before them, imagining the fleet that must be traveling within it. A fleet large enough to warp reality. A fleet that had been gone for 3,000 years by galactic reckoning, but only 300 years by their own time. The humans were coming home. And the galaxy was not ready. The crystal towers of Velthara Prime reached toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the largest tower, 17 different species sat in a massive circular chamber. This was the Galactic Council, the place where decisions affecting trillions of lives were made every day. Today they were about to discuss something most of them thought was completely pointless. Commander Hyon stood in the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. Some of those eyes were familiar, like the 2 eyes humans were supposed to have. Others were strange clusters of sensors, heat pits, or compound lenses that made his skin crawl. He had spent 5 years preparing for this moment, and he knew most of them would laugh at him. Honored Council, Hyun began, his voice steady despite his nerves. I have brought evidence that humans were real. They existed, and I believe I have found where they went. A ripple of noise went through the chamber. Some delegates chittered in amusement. Others made sounds that Hyun's translator struggled to interpret. High Arbiter Taejin, a tall being with silver skin and too many joints in his arms, raised one long-fingered hand for silence. Commander Hyon, we have been patient with your research, Taejin said, his voice tired. But this council has real problems to deal with. Trade disputes, border conflicts, pirate raids. We cannot waste more time on fairy tales. They are not fairy tales, Hyun insisted. He activated his data pad, and holographic images filled the air above him. These are photographs from derelict stations in the outer reach. Look at the symbols on the walls. This writing appears on 50 different abandoned structures across 12 sectors. The images showed strange letters in an alphabet that looked nothing like the standard galactic script. Words like Earth Colonial Authority and Terran Union were visible on rusted metal plates. This could be anything, grumbled Ambassador Guman, a bulky creature covered in thick scales. Ancient pirates, lost explorers, extinct species. The galaxy has seen thousands of civilizations rise and fall. But these stations are all from the same time period, Hyun argued. 3,000 cycles ago, and they all stopped transmitting within a 50-year window. That is not natural decline. That is coordinated abandonment or destruction. He pulled up another image, this one showing a recovered black box from a destroyed ship. This was found floating in dead space near the Corvin Nebula. It contains navigation data, and it has coordinates to a system the humans called Sol, a yellow star with 9 planets in an unexplored region of space. Counselor Borum, who represented the peaceful Ashani species, leaned forward with interest. Her kind believed in preserving knowledge above all else. Have you attempted to travel to these coordinates? I have requested permission 3 times, Hyun said, looking directly at Taejin. Each time I was denied. Taejin stood, his height making everyone else in the chamber look small. Because it is a waste of military resources. Commander, I understand you have dedicated years to this research. But the Council's position is clear. Humans, if they ever existed, are gone. They have been gone for millennia. This matter is closed. Hyun felt anger burning in his chest, but he knew better than to argue further. He had played his hand and lost. He bowed slightly and left the chamber, the sound of the Council moving on to other business following him out. 3 sectors away, on a small mining colony called Station Hadan, a young woman named Gina was having a very strange day. She worked as a communications technician, a job that was usually incredibly boring. Her duties involved monitoring automated signals from mining drones and making sure the station's data stream stayed clear. But for the past week, something odd had been happening. There was a signal that should not exist. Gina stared at her screens, watching the wavelength patterns scroll past. The signal was faint but growing stronger each day. It was not random noise from a star or electromagnetic interference from the mining equipment. It was structured, mathematical. It repeated every 17 minutes with perfect precision. Quan, you need to see this, Gina called out to her supervisor. Station Chief Quan was a middle-aged man who had worked in space for 30 years. He had seen solar flares, equipment failures, and even a pirate attack once. But when he looked at Gina's screen, his face went pale. How long has this been going on? He asked quietly. 7 days. It started weak, but it is getting stronger. I thought it might be a malfunction at first, but I have checked everything twice. This is coming from outside the system. Quan sat down heavily in a chair. His hands were shaking slightly. Do you know what this pattern is? No, I have never seen anything like it. I have, Quan said. Once in training, they showed us examples of non-natural signals. Ways to identify if something was made by intelligent life versus natural phenomena. Gina, this is not just intelligent. This is military-grade precision. Someone is broadcasting this and they are getting closer. Gina felt a chill run down her spine. Should we report it to the council? Yes, but first I want you to record everything. Every frequency, every modulation, every single detail. If this is what I think it is, we are looking at first contact with an unknown species. They worked through the night documenting the signal. Gina tried to decode it using every language in the Galactic database. Nothing worked. The mathematical structure was too complex, too different from anything known. On the third day of their investigation, something changed. Gina came to work and checked her instruments. Then she checked them again, certain she had made a mistake. The signal was gone. Quan, she shouted. It stopped. The station chief rushed over, his face tight with worry. He ran his own diagnostics, hoping it was just their equipment failing. But no, everything was working perfectly. The signal had simply vanished. Maybe it was nothing, Gina suggested, though she did not believe it herself. Quan shook his head slowly. Or maybe they finished what they were doing. Maybe they were sending a message to someone else, and now that message has been received. What do? We send our report to the council and we wait. And Gina, I need you to promise me something. Keep your emergency gear ready. Keep your escape pod prepped. I have a very bad feeling about this. 3 days later, every long-range sensor array in the outer territories went dark at exactly the same moment. The Galactic Council, receiving emergency signals from dozens of systems, finally realized that something was very, very wrong. And in his small apartment on Velthara Prime, Commander Hyun received a priority message from Station Hadan. When he read it, his hands began to shake. The message contained Gina's signal data, and Hyun recognized 3 decoded words buried in the mathematical patterns. Terra fleet approaching. The humans were real, and they were coming.